Last summer, Ted Nugent played there live. So a leftover sign. One man had a song to sing. He sang it once, he sang it twice. He thought it neat, he thought it nice. But somewhere after the 10 millionth time, he began to have second thoughts. Regarding awareness. If you aren't a constant witness to its comings and goings, you're not aware of much. One man tried to strike a deal with his mind, saying to it, "Look, if I don't tell you what I'm attempting to do, will you not always be telling me what you're up to?" But he knew he was in trouble when his mind asked him to repeat what he had just said, but with more precise pronunciation and much louder. Due to the constant paucity of fresh excitement, men continue to look for it in the past. That is, in their own less civilized nature. Those without interest in the mind will it in lower regions find. One man had this really neat piece of machinery which could do things nothing else could do, but which was subject to many variables, so much so that the machinery and the variables merged and became one. Many tales amongst the ordinary tell that man should not strike bargains with the devil and other evil forces. But the reason held secret therein and extracted but by a few is that from either view of the bilateral mind, bargains, deals, and compromises become ultimately indistinguishable from malevolence. For the early morning hiker, there can be no vague area twixt sleep and wake, clear and cloudy, effort and inertia, or certainty and imagination. There was a man who had a tent that had the ability to stand on the surest side of the steepest mountain. All that was required to use it was, remembering that he had it, the courage to throw it down, and the ability to be blunt about it. Question: why do you never see mystics in cemeteries for their own standing over a grave saying, "Oh, how we miss him"? Hint, there's more than one answer. One man had an automatic answering machine. Boy, did he ever. Which repeated things he had said and heard. Boy, did it ever. It did so regardless of his desire or intent. You can say that again. And he finally decided that enough is enough for all the good it did him. Regarding aggression. Though annoying, if you do not recognize it as a natural, normal housefly, your potential as a transcendental entomologist is sorely limited. It seems that the ordinary must hear something much more than once for them to believe it or it be exciting. You might care to CF this with the perception of the alert. A man found himself in a cave through which a river flowed, so swift and deep at times as to fill the space and engulf him to such an extent that he could little distinguish himself from the water. Then at other times, when it was not so powerful and high, he could stand aside and observe himself separate from the river. But then he began to wonder if, in fact, it was his observing that would cause the water to slow and recede. Maybe I don't give warning. Maybe I do. How to think better, part 12. Never repeat anything you've heard, especially to yourself. Men invented mechanical timepieces as an imprecise reflection of how they sense thought to mark their internal tempo. The energy serving the engine of civilization can be seen as coming from several graduated sources. It could first be said to flow from the civilized urge itself, and behind that could be said stands institutionalized religion, and behind that could be called man's innate sense of morality. But further back and more basic to it all is the is the great mystical cloud which immediately arose following the instant of creation, and which fed man his hunger for the mind to understand itself. This is civilization, the only life of man worthy of man. One man played a game that required you keep your eye on the ball, but he got so good at it, if that's the proper description, that his eye became indistinguishable from the ball. One man decided to write a letter to the editor about such matters, but upon opening his desk drawer to get a pen and paper, discovered the editor already therein. One man said that you might as well just forget it, but before he could say so, had already forgotten it. Though to them vague and difficult to describe, many men's notion of paradise is a place where there will be no irony, which precisely is to say, a place where the obvious can no longer be ignored. How to think better, part 14. Don't talk to yourself, especially in words. Related thereto, there is a chap who says that if you do find you talking to yourself, at least don't use complete sentences. Regarding excitement, what excites you evidences the development of your consciousness. There are certain things that birds can be told only if they are first tricked into listening. If a man is not then his own best friend, must he forever remain his foe? How is the mind to call to itself? What can it say that will shake itself awake? At first the trick is within a trick. Then later 'tis seen to be no trick at all, but rather the misdirecting ledger domain of the obvious and unconcealed. What magic! What a trick indeed! The more conscious never state their intention, especially to themselves. One man had a pet, similar to those had by others. But while everyone else acted as though theirs could only do one trick, this man discovered additional ones his could do. How to think better, part 16. Learn to do it at arm's length. See? Nothing up my sleeve. The mystic butterfly does not stop long enough to criticize the aroma of any particular flower. Regarding discovering, if you ain't constantly discovering, you ain't discovering. Regarding repetition, no, I ain't going over this one again. There was a man who had a train station and discovered a curious thing thereabout. He could either call out the trains or he could ride the trains, but he couldn't do both at the same time. Well, actually he could, he just wasn't able to be aware of it. Regardless of the verbal importance men place on distinguishing reality from distorted perceptions thereof, what good is this or any other reality that is selective and choosy, never blunt and inclusive? The Enlightenment reveals no secrets that have secrets from themselves. The ordinary must take their excitement where they can find it, while errant hunters take theirs with them. They have to. There is traced back in ordinary history, at least in excess of 2,000 years, sentiments expressed by leaders that said, referring to the people, is give them circuses and games. That is, to give you the ordinary routine interpretation, that if indeed a Caesar, a Greek version of Caesar, did at one time when pointed out that the populace was getting restless again and wanted to be fed and wanted to be able to walk outside without being thrown into chains and beaten. Supposedly that one of them finally said, at least perhaps with some advice from advisors, give them circuses and games, which the Roman vernacular finally became, the circus itself was the, I assume you know, the stadium wherein they would have such things as actual little sports of running and etc. And the games normally now is assumed to refer to bloodletting, actual fights between gladiators or throwing Christians to the lions or lions to Christians, or whatever whichever side you're on. This has been, and a later date, the so-called, or assumed now, apocryphal statement of Marie Antoinette when they were out there storming, and some of the king's advisors saying, the people are about to raise hell. They just had enough. They don't have anything to eat. That's kind of the last straw. We've just absolutely run out of bread. The bakeries here in Paris have no bread. And there's supposedly Marie Antoinette dancing around with champagne in her hand and an all-day party. And says, well, let them eat cake, like the rest of it. It is all the same thing. I'm getting to the point here if you'll listen. It has always been assumed it comes and goes under various guises. Now I've given you a range from 2500 up until the 1770s or 80s, and I could think of more. I will in a minute, as a matter of fact. Nowadays it's normally the kind of social critique of unqualified people being in positions of importance, but it's all the same thing. It appears to be, if you look at it a certain way, there are those that would claim after the fact that it is a conspiracy of dumbing. That, let's go back to Roman times, say. The people are getting restless and a Nero or some deranged, half-baked, half-witted, incestuous spawned, genetically deformed man is in charge. This way history looks at it, but I've already pointed out to you, they are actually the safest person to be under. And within, as long as they don't screw you individually. You always have to throw that in. But just because a guy is deranged and somewhat lacking in intellectual wherewithal does not by any means preclude him from being the kind of leader you might want under certain conditions. At any rate, so Nero is told the people are so restless. Have you heard what happened over in Egypt or what happened in so-and-so, that we better do something? And one way or the other, through his own devices, or just it came about, to the point that he would constantly, shortening up history into my own version right quick, as you know, it got to be the slogan, give them games and sports, games and circuses, is that the people will put up all kinds of stuff. I mean, they're out there going hungry. We've taken their land away. We can walk out there and just draft people into the army. We can draft them into serving here as slaves in court. We can do almost anything. But if once a week, if on Sunday, if we go out there in the Coliseum, if we go out there in the circus, and we got a bunch of good sports and games, and everybody can compete in one neighborhood against another, and end it off by bringing in some people of foreign religions, different kinds of people that doesn't look like us, different cultures, and bring them in there, and let our guys just hack them to death or feed them to lions or wild hyenas, and the people just love it. And they'll go home and they'll last another week. That all you got to do is distract them with that kind of crudeness. They were saying that in the Western world. I'm relying on your people's own mortal history. I'm not telling you what more I may know, but at least on what is known, that has been used quite successfully. And don't point out to me that the Roman Empire finally fell. They're still doing it. And your government hadn't fell. I have never seen the throne here in Syria any stronger than it is today. Or Finland, whichever you like. There is not a conspiracy, there's not a new conspiracy of dumbing, because that, when it gets to a more intellectual level, is what that sort of thing is. But at the most basic level, ordinary people get their excitement only from, about the only source they have is from ferality, their uncivilized nature, that and bad news. But it is the attraction of ferality, which, in case somebody wants to write me, I happened to check. There is no such word, and I'm heartbroken, so I'm going ahead and use it. There's only feral listed as an adjective, and no ferality as a noun. But there is now, folks. There should be. Think about it. That is what the appeal is. Now, it's easy and nothing new for people to criticize, ordinary minds, to criticize much of what goes on in the world, especially entertainment and this kinds of things distract people, to ridicule it or to label it as being very lowbrow, beneath the dignity of people with good taste and sophistication. But that is not a very determining description of what it is. What it is this: the ordinary mind of everybody is almost limited to excitement, in the field of excitement, to that which is below the level of their own consciousness, to ferality, to bad news. That goes all the way from, to take up the kind of slack that if I was going to do both parts for ordinary mind to object to or to raise exception, it goes all the way from what would, I'm sure, be considered the lower classes' primary support of such things as roller derby or professional wrestling. All the way from that to the people, they're sold out years and years, decades in advance of the ringside, the courtside seats, high-priced, the kinds of things I pointed out at the national, the NBA, professional football. And it is people of great financial wherewithal, intellectual wherewithal, and they would separate themselves from watching tennis, pro football. They would separate themselves from that, or they would try to distinguish themselves between that and the fans of roller derby and professional wrestling. But it is all the same thing. And it's not only that, it's music, it's movies, it's almost all literature outside the classroom. The attraction, and this is not an attack, I'm describing something. It is normally heard as an attack, I'm describing. And all you've got to do is check with you if you believe that you might be the exception. But if you look around at what is entertainment, and entertainment is that which excites the mind. The body gets its excitement. You do not have to feed it, you don't have to look for it. But we're now in a position that the excitement of the body, which used to be just on the basis of having to feed itself and survive, that is now in such recess, there is now such minor, comparably speaking, significance that people do now have to get out and pay to do work, known as joining a gym, going to a health club, is they have to do it. But the basic point is that the body does not have to seek excitement. It is not the body sitting around going, what will I do? The body knows what to do. If you're sitting there and been watching TV or just sitting in a chair for 2 or 3 hours or 2 or 3 days and your legs begin to do this and you do, assuming that you're, again, just fairly sane, you don't have to sit there and think what to do. You know damn well what to do. Throw on your tinny boppers and go for a 10-mile run or run until you get over the nervousnesses. But the excitement of the mind is another story. And it has been left all of these years. It has not changed that much, regardless of what you might at first think, from 2,500 years ago in Greece. The mind, with ordinary people, is hard-pressed. It must seek out excitement. It is not the same kind of unspoken, known awareness that the body has, I just described, as to when it begins to feel stiff and tense and all that, that if you're just halfway sane, you know to get up and exercise. Do something, go cut the grass. There's no question about what to do. The mind is faced with the same kind of situation of how to get excited, and there is no one thing to do, such as exercise, just leave it at one word, movement, is the excitement of the body. Movement and rest, which is the same thing. Or, as you philosophers like to say, the other side of the same coin is just two sides. But the body knows how to be excited. The mind has to continually seek out. And the ordinary are left, in a sense, just between you and I. And between you and I, we both have some understanding of ordinary minds, don't we? You don't have to admit it. But in a sense, just casually speaking between you and I, it's sort of pitiful and sad that the mind has as its only common excitement, the only common source of excitement is a looking back, is games and circuses. That's it. You do not see movies based upon the inner life of Goethe or Kant or Socrates. If you see anything that purports to be, or at least in advertising, they'll say, great new movie from Orion Pictures or something, the first movie to take you inside the mind of, and you think, well, now we're getting somewhere, a serial rapist. I mean, who wants to? Well, I know I've been through this, but it's still just, it's damn near amazing. There's not much in life amazing, but maybe it's people's excuse and they think, well, I don't normally like to go and see movies about yucky stuff, but maybe it'll be I'll learn a psychological lesson to take you inside the mind of a mass murderer. Oh, that'll be great. The great lessons I'll learn. What, when to strike? What kind of victim to figure? Back to, I pointed this out before, and it's not a critique, but you need to see because I'm trying to drag you somewhere with this. The mind, this has nothing to do with class, it has nothing to do with social status, it has nothing to do with wealth, it has nothing to do with education. Because I was trying to point out to you, even those, the professors at Harvard, academics, what do they do for excitement? They're right out there at the NBA games, they're out there at pro football, out there at soccer games, they're watching tennis matches. They will go to movies, they'll watch TV, and none of it is actually exciting the mind in any way that is future-faced. There is nothing commonly available, it's just a fact from a more transcendental view, there is no entertainment available anywhere, commonly available, that is worthy of a man's mental appetite. With ordinary people it doesn't matter, remember, but I'm speaking to someone who might aspire to something else. But what you need to see is, it's not that people are going around grasping, whining, complaining that there's nothing good. No. Contraire, as you would say. The only complaint they have is, somebody turns to me and said, didn't I hear that they're going to some way try to revive, what's his name, Freddy Krueger, and have Friday the 13th or Chainsaw Murderers from Texas, volume 27? They don't complain about that's all there is. They complain there's not enough of it. Where's the new one? The excitement of ordinary minds comes only from a looking back. It comes only from a looking back individually down one's nervous system to one's less civilized, more feral condition. That is the only thing that excites the mind. If there was common excitement available to the mind, or if the mind, put to you another way, was excited commonly by the kinds of things that it could be, then you would not be forced, children would not be forced to go to school. They would go to school, they would beg to go to school the same way that they will beg for money to go to a movie. It'd be just the opposite. That if man's mind was up to the level of being as hungry as a mystic's is, then you would not have to make children go to school. You'd be fighting them off, and they'd be driving you crazy for the same thing. I want to go to class more. Why does school let out during the summer in the same way that they do now, that I want to watch TV or I want to go to a movie? It is all based upon, also you might look at it this way if it'll help, is always based upon activities of the body, such as, again it's just an example, it's not irony, but the kinds of thing that seems to be very common now is books, movies, television shows, that the blurbs, the teasers and the ads for it will be things like, finally a movie that dares take you inside the mind of, but it always refers, even though that sounds like it's going to be something that might be mentally stimulating or could be psychologically useful, that is, like to take you inside for the first time, a movie with a courage to take you inside the mind, the actual mind of a mass murderer. You know that's not true. I mean, even if there was some validity, if you thought, well, I'm taking a psychology course, that might be interesting. I don't like stuff like that. Come on, shape up. You know the movie is not about it. It's not some kind of psychological documentary. That's the ad, inside the mind of a mass murderer. You're not going to see anything mental in the movie. You're not going to see any kind of analyzation of a man's mind. The closest they come closest they're able, remember this is not a conspiracy, but the closest that things are able was that they will show, they'll say, well, obviously this man did not turn out to be a mass murderer overnight. So we'll go back to his childhood, and has flashbacks to his childhood, showing how he was physically abused. But you understand it. It's the kind of thing that the obviousness of it is never seen. There is no common analyzation, there is no common study, there is no common interest in the structure, the operation, and the workings of the human mind. Libraries, theater marquees, television teasers are replete with proclamations of something having to do with the human mind, such as inside the mind of a mass murderer. And even if that was of some interest, if it had any potential to have any mental nourishment, it is not pursued, because commonly speaking, no one is excited by that. Now, surely I've pushed that far enough. You know if you're going over and sign up at a community college or any school for Philosophy 101, some undergraduate required course in philosophy, I dare say one of the safer bets in the world is you're never going to be locked out because of lack of seating room. Maybe I should have gone past the prerequisite. If you just volunteer to take Philosophy 101, there is just no chance that they're going to say, sorry, we're full up for the next 2 quarters. Even mathematics. Anything even resembling direct, and I don't mean that's the only thing available, but anything even resembling direct excitement for the mind compared to excitement that actually comes from the body, that comes from man's less than mental past. That is, circuses and games. Comparably speaking, there is no comparison. That's how you can speak comparably. That's why we have terms about nerds and geeks. You mean he likes mathematics? You mean he actually took philosophy? I mean, they didn't make him? He actually took a course? 2? Ew, boy. No, I don't want to date with him. I don't want to see him or her. Everybody knows that something's, that's not a real person. They're abnormal. I was going to point out that even in the areas, how about this, of gossip, which is simply history that hadn't made hardback covers yet. But notice gossip, which is a great form. It is one of the most common forms of excitement for ordinary people. Always has been. And, today, thanks to the increase in communication and media, it's even bigger than ever. But look, all gossip. It's so obvious, but somebody should. Surely I can catch somebody and make you excited temporarily. Think about it. Or no, you don't have to think about it. I'm about to put it in your face. All gossip is about man physically, never mentally. Some things, when you begin to see out of the mind, you can develop your own course of study. I've tried to hint about this before. Things that you suddenly see, and you should just be able to see them and not have to repeat it, not have to have it beat in your head, regardless of how I may do it. But you just see it, and at first you're amazed, like, wow. But there's at least 2 other stages of real quick amazement. No need for them being any longer lasting. But the second one is, how come I never saw that before? And then, well, how come nobody ever noticed that before? All gossip is about man physically, never mentally. If there's gossip, if you heard that on some TV show, or if you looked on the head of one of these tabloid journals and it said, the truth revealed about Professor so-and-so, or Dean of New York University of Law, or School of Law, and whatever it was, is it going to be something like, and you know it's an expose, you know it's going to be gossip, so you look down and it says, Dean of Yale School of Theology, and cover up the rest, turn your head. Is it going to say something? Is it going to bring out some kind of juicy gossip of some beliefs that he's had that he never admitted? Are you serious? That some way it's been revealed that the man is actually a Republican, not a Democrat? No. It can start off, you understand why I'm trying to juxtapose it that way, that would apparently be somebody far removed from the sordid world of soap operas and Hollywood and sports. a man up in the world of academia. But if it's going to be gossip, it's not going to be, oh boy, wait till I tell you what he thinks. I mean, we slept into his hotel room. He was out of town on this conference, and somebody bugged his room, and he was sitting there. One of the girls, one of his teaching associates went with him up to the room, and they had a glass of champagne. And somebody bugged the room. They put a little thing up there. And he began to talk about Whitehead and Bertrand Russell like dogs. There is no such thing as mentally based gossip. There is none. And so if it's going to start off Dean of Harvard School of Philosophy, you know what it's going to be. Found in a room nude with teaching assistant. That even if it starts out with somebody intellectual, there is no such thing as intellectual gossip. And the reason I keep repeating gossip is not to pick on gossip, but you do understand. I want you to see that gossip is one of the most popular forms of mental excitement to people. And it is mental excitement, even though gossip's about the body, because it's not exciting the body. But the gossip that will excite the mind is still back to the level of man's past. The mind has not reached the point that there is some way. It's not just a silly, non-sequiturial base joke for me to say that little scene about they bugged the guy's room and found out that he was, after a few drinks, and with this young teaching assistant, female, began to say very unflattering things about Bertrand Russell. That's not just being silly, it's just that nobody's interested. That is not exciting. And it's not because that the people who read it are uneducated. The people that's interested in philosophy are not interested in that. If they saw somebody in another philosophy department, they looked and it says, Dean of Harvard School of Philosophy, and it's some philosopher in some other state, some other college, there at the supermarket counter, and he goes, God, and he knows who it is, one of the big names of philosophy. And it says, Dean of Harvard School of Philosophy, and he looks, and he doesn't care what he thinks, but it says, found in motel room with nude 17-year-old teaching assistant. And even he, if he's going to be interested at all, it's that. But even he, in the same field, is not going to be interested. It says, is found, after a few drinks, to have said unflattering remarks to a 17-year-old female teaching assistant about Bertie Russell. Who cares? The mind is not excited. Listen, really, this is getting somewhere. The human mind at any ordinary level, and I'm trying to take it beyond what ordinary people consider an ordinary level, that is educated, sophisticated people. They are not interested. The mind is not excited by mental things. Where do they go for entertainment? Again, I'll try it one more time. This is not to pick on sports, as you know. But where do the heads of big names and people in important positions in the world of academia, what do they, as a rule, do? Not that different from everyone else, for excitement. Or as they might put it, for leisure time. How do they spend their pastime? At the movies, at sports games, or watching TV. And none of it is an excitement to the mind at the mental level. If you need another way to look at it, what they call excitement is exactly one of the words I just used, is always a form of recreation, almost relaxation. Because if you tried to take a man, professor of philosophy, let's say, and said, I've always been impressed by thinkers and et cetera in philosophy, and goes, yes. And you go, and I've always been curious. People like you I've always admired, and I just couldn't go to school, and I wasn't arranged that way. But somebody like you, I've read your books and papers, and God, your mind, I envy you. You're one of my heroes. Oh, okay. Well, just, what's your average day? What do you do? Can I come over maybe and spend the weekend with you out at your house or something? Anyway, if he told you what he did, are you going to expect that on the weekend, when he gets home after work, that he pours himself a martini and takes off his shoes and sits down and reads philosophy, reads mathematics, that he does anything that you might, from the ordinary level, call intellectually challenging? No. That's his job. And I don't mean that his job pays off. He's not any more conscious, or they would hand out enlightened certificates along with your diploma when you graduate from college. It's not that. But what I'm trying to get you to see is that the mind at every common level has no taste for, and so thusly, because life knows what it's doing, life is feeding itself inside a closed system, the ordinary mind, the common mind, has no taste for, thus life does not provide at any common public level mental excitement. When men want mental excitement, or hit the level of consciousness, as a rule, we're just talking common. There's just very few exceptions. It's not even worth us speaking about. At this level, they look, they do not know it, but they turn their attention down below the level of consciousness into their feral past, into gossip, into bad news, into things having to do with man's body, which is the past, into his sexual foibles, into blood and guts, circuses, people killing each other, hurting each other, the possibility of stock car racing, all the movies, there's all this vicarious looking back into man's past. Ooh, God, is he going to kill her? Are they going to have a wreck? It is believed, if it's pointed out, it is believed by many that there is some sort of conspiracy, and people who would be so inclined could have listened to what I said for the last 30 minutes and go, well, all you're doing is lending support to it. I knew I was right. That if it's pointed out after the fact, they are inclined to want to say that the powers that apparently run the external world, the Caesars and the King Louis, that there is some sort of conspiracy by them putting on games and circuses to distract the people from their civil rights and from making greater economic progress and sharing in wealth, that there is a kind of conspiracy, not just to physically hold them down, which is a running thing, that never stops. That's what I keep referring you to, the young Turks in the street with the Molotov cocktails and the would-be revolutionists at a civil level all over the world even now, that they believe, well, that there is a conspiracy for the powers that be to keep us down. Which, boy, talk about, how did they ever figure that out? Hey, the people in power don't want to leave and let me in. Well, they may not amount to much, but at least they're not stupid, right? At any rate, there's always that feeling, which there is physical validity there too. That no one wants to give up power. The Pope's not going to give up power. He's not going to just somebody come up and say, I've decided that I'm smarter than you. You're not going up to the Pope. You're not going up to the President of the United States, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. You do not go up to someone in civil power, in physical power, and say, by the way, no real complaint. You seem like a hell of a guy. I love the way you dress. And I like many of the things you've done, but I have been studying you. I've gone back and looked at your college scores, SATs, and your IQ tests. And you forgot, but you're in high school. Anyway, no doubt, I'm just telling you objectively, I'm a much smarter person than you are. And so I just thought I want to take this opportunity. I managed to get in and have an audience here with you for the good of all the people. Because you love the people, you always say you do. Of course, by then, he's not nodding much of anything. He's just waiting. But he said, would you always talk about how you love the people? But since I am obviously, just objectively it's proven I'm smarter than you, I assumed that once I came here and pointed out that you would turn over the sash and the seal of office and let me, for the benefit of all of us, run the country. Yeah. So you've always got the civil rebels who will say with great validity, but it takes no insight and there is no revelation there. It's no more than realizing that no lion, no head of the pride ever leaves unless some young lion chews his ass up, tears him to death. It simply does not happen. No wolf, no alpha male wolf or chimpanzee or mandrill ever gives up his leadership role. He does not simply go, well, okay, I've had enough, or, you're better looking, you're younger, why don't you take over? Yeah, right. Never. So you've always got that. When it gets now into the human sphere and people can speak, then they attribute it to all kinds of secret nefarious forces, that there's a conspiracy to keep me out of power. Yeah, but Jesus, give yourself a break. It takes all of 10 seconds to figure that out. But then they not only will they try and physically become rebels and guerrillas and try to take power by force, but then they want to weave it on into some great philosophical mystique, that there is some great force, there are great struggles here, not just me, poor humble rebel that I am out here in the mountains of New Guinea or Venezuela or Ecuador. It's not just me physically trying to wrest power from this despot up there in Lima or Quito, but it is also representative of this great philosophical, this continuing philosophical, this battle between differing forces of, if I may say so, like good and evil. That's always been, that's just horseshit. Just people in power don't give it up and they want it. But they then want to weave it into some great conspiracy. There is no great conspiracy behind what they see. But now, past that, there's also, if it's pointed out, there periodically rises someone wanting to say that there is a conspiracy beyond the physical one for those in power to stay in power. That's a given. I mean, you got to be almost dumbass beyond belief not to understand that. I know if you're ordinary, you're not supposed to because you believe. Well, wait a minute. We have decent, very decent people, especially in certain countries like ours here in Italy and France, that we are based upon democratic, republican principles and, you know, fairness and fair elections and for the good of the people. Those in power want to stay in power, and many times would be pretenders to the throne, would be alpha male wolves and lions that are a little younger. Surprise, surprise, they want to take over. There's the conspiracy. There's nothing else. Anything after that is just gilding the herring, as we like to say in Paul Psi 17. You got to go away to ever hear that one. But then, beyond that, if it's ever pointed out, and sometimes it seems to spontaneously arise, there's someone pointing out this, that there is another conspiracy, that it is like a higher level, or even beyond, it's behind, and it is more malevolent than the conspiracy for Nero to stay in power. Now, we know that. We know how ruthless he is, and anyone who even, you know, he kills a brother. He'll kill part of his own family if they start showing signs of wanting to get too close to the throne, the scepter. Now, we know all that. But there's something else going on. I'll just go back to Nero and Rome and that kind of stuff. They'll say, all right, all this stuff of this, having these 2 or 3 a week games and circuses and letting blood and killing people and animals attacking humans and all that, there's something else going on here. Now, it helps keep him in power. I understand that because it helps keep the people distracted. I know that's what he's doing. But there's even more. There is a conspiracy going on to dumb people, to hold down their level of intellectual or conscious or spiritual development, take any term you like. This is not a continuing, running intellectual thread in humanity, I know. But there are many people, and I'm not talking about some kind of fringe crackpots that believe in conspiracies of some group of bankers or textbook authors or aluminum siding salesmen that are banded together and actually running the world. I don't mean them. I'm talking about people in the mainstream of life, in the world of academia. If you put them the right way, if you said, all right, how about television? Let's go to here today. If you went to a non-crackpot, not a right-wing phalangelist and conspiratorial buff, and you said, do you ever get the impression, just looking at television and movies and etc., just common culture, do you ever get the impression, well, first off, you know, just between you and I, it's not a very high quality. You know, assuming you guys were strangers and you're just starting the conversation, he would immediately go, well, yeah, you can say that again. You go, well, I just wanted to be sure we're on the same ground. It is actually, I'm not in favor of censorship. I'm playing both parts right quick to get you to see how this balances and how it works. And I could say, well, I'm not in favor of censorship, but my God, what are we doing to our children for let them to see all this sex and violence, blood and guts, circuses and games, and for it to be passed off as entertainment that's worthy of a 20th century boy or girl's attention? I mean, this is just horrible. And he'll go, yeah. And you say, you know, sometimes I don't believe in conspiracies and all that crap, but sometimes it's almost as though, almost. I mean, even though I'm telling you right now, I'll say to this guy, I don't believe in conspiracy and all that crap. And he goes, yeah, well, I know. You go, but how about this? You can look at the manifestation of something, even if you doubt the common description of from whence it cometh. If somebody says, well, bad luck comes from dead people who are not satisfied, or sexual deviation comes from spirits who didn't die peacefully who are now troubling someone's soul. The point is, you can look and say, well, there's certain things going on like the sexual deviancy we can't explain how it comes about. Or just anything, I just picked that out of thin air. And you can say, well, all right, I don't believe that kind of story that's caused by such and such, but there is no doubt that it exists. We can look at the manifestation and say, all right, something exists and something caused it, but the common conception of what causes it, I don't agree to. Now back to what I was saying. So I could say to this guy, and I don't believe in conspiracies, and I don't believe that somebody's sitting around playing this, but when you look at what passes for entertainment all over the world, in all cultures, what excites the human mind, the people will go and sit. They're not exercising themselves. They're not exciting the body. He goes, yeah, I got you. They sit in a theater, they sit in a club, they'll sit at a sporting event, they'll sit somewhere to be entertained. And the entertainment, all across the board, not picking out any specific to skew, it's as though, even though I don't believe in it, it could be, looking at the manifestation, as though there were a group of people somewhere that for some reason wanted to keep the human intellect, the human consciousness, to continually, it's been going for thousands of years, I could tell the guy. Think about Nero, all the way up to today. Has it changed that much? And you go, no, you're right. It's as though there was a conspiracy to keep people from becoming much brighter, much more conscious, much more intelligent, much more civilized, at least up here. Civilized behavior, yeah. But it's as though someone is trying to keep humans dumb. It's almost like a dumbing conspiracy, even though I don't believe in conspiracies. I go, yeah. But if there was one, then the results, what we see now, would fit. You know what I mean? You know what I mean, Vern? He'd go, well, yeah, you're right. Even though I don't believe in it, it is as though there is a conspiracy of dumbing. Where can a man turn for real intellectual nourishment or excitement? But now if you understand why I'm saying excitement, because going to a movie, doing anything that's commonly available, pastimes are pastimes, I'm not attacking that, but you are completely out of it if you believe that you go to a movie or watch television or go to a concert or go to a reading or go to a play, read a book, almost any book. If you believe that you are receiving, when I say intellectual excitement, nourishment, that you have become more conscious from reading that, hearing that, being excited, you're hopeless. You're ordinary, but you're hopeless. It's not an instant enlightenment that someone realizes that, but by now it should be obvious once it's pointed out. It is simply not. It is not its purpose. My rhetorical question I would just put to you is, where can a man go if he was looking for more than that? Nowhere. There is nowhere to go. If you don't take your excitement with you, you're out of luck. As one of the news items tonight said, the ordinary must take their excitement where they find it. They must. And if you were just on a whatever excuse you want, it's Saturday, you're tired, you've had a couple of beers, you've got nothing else to do, any excitement you go out and get is, in a sense, if you were a would-be mystic, is in a sense a kind of dumbing of you, which is the only reason you'd have a drink, it's the only reason you'd go out to a movie. It's just that, all right, I'm going to turn my consciousness off what little I can keep going, which should give some of you the serious heebie-jeebies to think about doing that. What as little consciousness as I have, even on Saturday, even on a hot day, thinking about a cold beer or going into a movie, it's still kind of a private heebie-jeebies to consider that I'm about to knowingly lower my consciousness when I can just barely hold on to what I got. But I'll leave that's between you and your God. Between you and your own stupidity. You and your own whatever. The news item said that the ordinary minds must take their excitement where they find it. Because if you walk out the door, if you go out into life, it is all at the same level. It is not intellectual nourishment, and it's just easy to see. It does not increase a man's consciousness. There is nothing out there. For a very good reason. It would be unstabling. Or if it was out there, then the whole tempo of life would have changed. It's just that things are in balance and there is nothing out there. Life is not tripping itself up. Civilization is not going to stick its own eye out. It is not going to go as fast as it can, then reach down and stick a broom down between the spokes of its bicycle. Neither are you, an ordinary person. That's why there are stories been written that people didn't even know what they were doing, of shooting one's wild duck, shooting one's dream, capturing one's dream, opening Pandora's box, getting 3 wishes. All of it not that the writers necessarily understood it, but it's all based upon that same thing is, don't shake me. I got 20 more years to sleep before I die.
Yeah.
Don't be telling me crap like that. Leave me alone. Too blunt.
Yeah.
It says that ordinary minds must take excitement where they find it. And that's everybody. If you're up at the ordinary level, you must take whatever excites you. If you are not, at any particular moment, if you think, well, screw my consciousness, I want some time out. I want to dumb myself. Then walk out the door, turn your TV, do anything. Seek out that which is commonly available as intellectual excitement. And you've got to take whatever it is that excites you. You've got to take whatever is available. You can bitch and you can whine, which can be part of the excitement. But that's all you got. So I'm about to repeat the news item in full. Maybe it makes a little more sense that the ordinary mind, ordinary people must take excitement where they find it. While an errant hunter or knight or adventurer must take his with him. You've got to. If you don't have it, you're not going to find it. It is, back to a few months ago, sort of the little playing around the rose bushes sort of hints and warnings I tried to give that just chronologically, hormonally, the older you get, the greatest would-be mystics in the world, the older you get, you lose that kind of sense of excitement. In a sense, the weight of life, the stability of civilization itself, the dynamic motion of the parade itself is in such a way that you're supposed to slow down. You're supposed to not only, it's obvious you want less exercise, you'd have to force yourself to do it. You get past the age of your greatest, well, men and women do your own version, the greatest sexual hormonal spurt. You get past your mid-20s or maybe early 20s now, and you do have to force yourself to get exercise if you don't work for a living. If you're not actually in the construction trade or doing something that you must physically move, you must force yourself. You have less and less interest. Your body physically, and it's not some sort of psychological flaw. As you know, male and female, the body begins to shift, the weight shifts. You begin to look different. You begin to look like pears and avocados and jelly-filled donuts. And it's not just from overeating. The whole body shifts. The weight begins to go because the body no longer needs that kind of excitement. You're just getting ready to die. It's just like, well, I put on a little weight so that in case the padding in the casket, I guess, is not real good at least. But simultaneously with it. See, here's the point. It's not as if the mind was so hungry for excitement already that it needs to be slowed down. See, that was a sarcastic remark. Not that the mind needs to be slowed down, like the body slows down to get you ready to die. You kind of get used to being dead. Get fat and arthritic, or you don't want to move, and you think, well, at least I don't have to exercise. I've always assumed that there are many. I'll have to get personal and let you in. I've always guessed, I don't have proof, that many old folks, you see them sitting around, we're talking about 60 or 70, that just hardly ever move. They just sit there, and you can think, well, the poor old things, they used to be so active, and she just sits there now. I suspect that many old people are actually sitting there and thinking, well, it's horrible, to kind of get all beat up and, be covered in liver spots and lose your hair and kind of can't get around. But at least, God damn, I don't have to exercise or do anything. I can just sit here, and it seems natural. I don't have to apologize. Don't have to feel guilty. But now back to my theatrical, sarcastic remark to try to slide you into it. Now that just happens. And I was sort of making a backhanded explanation of, well, you're going to die anyway. You're past the point that you would have been the head, the alpha male of some lion pack. You're a man 30 years old and you're past your sexual prime and you've no longer, you're not fighting it. You're married now, got yourself a double wide and a good mortgage, and you're just sliding. You're beginning to put on weight and watching more and more TV. It is just natural. But then my little sarcastic theatrical remark was, and this does affect the mind, and my remark was, as though the mind needed to be slowed down. You understand? That was a sarcasm, because it barely gets going to start with. Forget that a man is only real active for 20 or 25 years physically. This just barely gets going. 2 or 3 years old, it gets going. When you start asking what, why, And suddenly, life slaps you around. Shut up. You're driving me crazy. What do you mean, why's the sky blue? In other words, you start becoming an adult. Or you become educated. Not to pick on education. I was going to do that, but we didn't get around to it in another way. But as life stifles you, you just get sane enough, intellectually ignited enough to be sane, learn the multiplication tables, be semi-literate, and that's it. And so you really, intellectually, you became a couch potato, most people intellectually, by the age of 5, 6, 7. I don't know, some of you may have held out until 5th or 6th grade. But if anything other than what you were forced to do, as far as the intellectual, real spontaneity and the real curiosity that you had individually as a kid, by the age of 2 or 3, it was not a conspiracy, but it had already been dumbed out of you. Because you kept asking questions. I've pointed this out to you enough time, that you kept asking questions that people said, including your heroes, your father, priests, rabbis, that you kept asking your teachers at school, and you asked them questions, no. And nobody would answer it, and you just... Where is a man going to look for excitement? There's nowhere to look, and it's sort of, as I said between us, it's sort of pathetic. And the reason I said that was to make some of you maybe think, well, Jesus, I'm pathetic because it's happening to me all the time. It's kind of pathetic that ordinary people only have the excitement that they have available. And it's all on the basis of circuses and games, blood and guts, chainsaw murderers, mass serial rapists, horrors of war, the inhumanity and the grotesque behavior of humanity as a whole. That's all they've got. And the pathetic thing is, that's all they got. And the pathetic thing is, that's all they got. And the pathetic thing is, you're supposed to go, I do that a lot too. I know. And you keep thinking, well, somebody pull me out. You know. I bet maybe hanging around listening to this stuff will help some. Yeah. But if somebody else has to produce the excitement, notice you do come here. People tune me in. Say, I watch it faithfully. I feel so much better watching it. I understand. Well, what's going to happen when I die? We go off the air. You think, well, it's not the same anymore. Yeah. Well, yeah, well, the person that was talking about is not here. Yeah. A real errant, a real robust, a real alive mystical knight cannot take excitement where he finds it. You can't be limited to that. That's ordinary. If you got in it, you got to take it with you. Take it with you. Because it's there.